Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's webinar looking at the Maori economy within agri and the potential for it to help drive a really successful future. Now, we've had a bit of a program change, so Tracy Hopapa unfortunately is very unwell, sends her apologies. However, as a wonderful gift and blessing, she actually connected us with Te Horipo Karaitiana from Te Awanui. He's the CEO of that, and he is embedded in Maori agri, the Maori agri economy. He's awesome. Like when I looked at your bio, it was off the charts. We've got Andrew Watene as well. He's actually a dear friend of mine who I worked at KPMG with. And so we're going to get into this today, but what we'll start with first is just looking at if you have any audio issues. So you are on mute. But if you do have any audio issues or problems with hearing or getting online, try using your phone as an ultimate end game. But first check that your computer and your volume and all those things are turned up. But what we found is if all else fails, the phone will be very successful. So look, we're going to get straight into this. And so Te Horipo, can you give us a bit of background on who you are and I guess some demographics around the Maori economy and agri?
Sure. First of all, I'm a poor substitute for Tracy Hopapa, but nonetheless, I'm here to fill in for her, and I'll do my best. Also, just to acknowledge the people in the room. There's many people in the virtual room that I know, so to acknowledge you too. Hoi anō, ko Horipo Karaitiana taku ingoa. E mi ane kia koutou I raro I te manake taka o katoa tāwhito, ko raki nui te raki a papa tū whenua mā, nō reira tēnā koutou. So it's a privilege to be here, and as an introduction, I'll just talk about some of the organisations that I'm fortunate to be involved in, and that'll give you a good profile around Maori economy. First of all, Federation of Māori Authorities. Tracy Hopapa is the chair of the Federation of Māori Authorities, and it's very much the peak level organisation for Māori collectives, particularly land-based collectives. There's just under 1 million hectares of rural Māori freehold land in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and of that, just under 90% is governed by 396 Māori trusts and corporations under the Māori Land Act. In addition to that, you've got the post-treaty settlement PSGEs and other asset holding companies, but by far, those trusts and corporations represent the largest of the collective's assets. The other key feature around Foma is that it's cross-sectorial, but still primary industries predominantly. So across mixed livestock, dairy, horticulture, arable, etc. The key, in my introduction, I'll just mention very briefly the key underpinning Te Ao Māori or Matauraka Māori that underpins these organisations. And for Foma, having been formed 40 years ago, it's very much me uru kahikatea, and metaphorically talks about the kahikatea as a whānau of trees, live, breathe and thrive typically together. And that was an old karakia from Tūhoi, so Nai Tūhoi gifted that karakia Māori for Federation of Māori Authorities. If I move on to Foma Innovation, so recently Foma wanted to start building a bridge between our primary industry base and the emerging tech and innovation sector, which in time will be the largest sector in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So the Federation of Māori Authorities, Tracy specifically in Taratei Cross, asked if we could put together a team to look at the innovations, place and space for Foma. And that's very much underpinned with the insight of Riki Rangi-Gage from Whānau Apanui, a whakatauake or a philosophical saying that is toitū te iwi, toitū te tangata. So toitū te taiao, toitū te tangata. So what we're doing is four things. Whenua tangatora, which is a Matauraka Māori lens and can be narrowly described as regen ag. And our target is to have 20% of all Māori rural freehold land in some regenerative process under Whenua tangatora. The Solutions Lab, so that's how do we connect innovation and technology to the Māori primary industries asset base. So a Solutions Lab is basically connecting an innovation function to Maori collectives and or clusters of Maori collectives. So at the moment, we're standing one up in plant-based bioactives. There's one in the pipeline around the utilisation of 5G, and there's also another one in the pipeline around genomics. It may also look at specific issues and contemporary issues within Māori collectives. Like, for example, for WMI, which I'll explain a little bit later, one of our biggest issues is dealing with effluent. So how do we deal with that more effectively than we can? Other organisations might be interested in implementing a circular business model. So again, that's where the Solutions Lab is there, providing the capability to solve solutions at an entity level, at a cluster level, or at a regional level. The third one is around genomics. So as kaitiaki, or active guardians in the world in which we operate, there's not only the physical world that we see, there's a digital overlay, and then there's also the biosphere or the genomic level, molecular level environment too. So to be effective kaitiaki, we, instead of letting others biopirate our environment, we also need to look at how we can bioprospect the bounty that exists across our land and sea bases more holistically tai ao. And finally, rangatei Māori, rangatei order, and that's simply about how do we move those 50+% of Māori who are 24 years of age and under, and unlock the potential of them not only for our Maori economy but for Aotearoa New Zealand full stop. So our rangatei order strategy is very much based on STEM, which you will be familiar with. At an entity level, I'm privileged to be the Deputy Chairman on Watene Corporation. So we've got a 10,000 hectare block around Mangakino, and around 5,000 hectares of that is in forestry. And we've got a reasonable scale dairy platform of 12,000 cows, and it is in quite a sensitive catchment. Whilst our asset bases are $300 million, our strategy was not to be peasant farmers in our own country. So we set out on a value chain play in addition to building up our production base, and that value chain play was called Miraka, and it's a very successful exporter, exporting over $200 million of product in year 3. And we're moving along the value chain, which I've got to say is not easy. So we have powder products, we have Topol Pure, which is a branded UHT, and soon powder products. We tried business to consumer brand by order, and that was just a complete disaster for us. So we regrouped, and we're going to shortly have another push at it through a high premium milk product. And for Awanui Hukapak, I'm privileged again to be the CEO of Awanui Hukapak. So our shareholders are based are predominantly kiwi fruit growers, but are diversified right across industrial property development, elder care, mixed livestock, and so forth. And their aspiration is underpinned by Te Whaiao, which is a transformational agenda. 3 simple stratagem: growing our food basket, growing our people, which is our Kiwi Leaders program, and innovation. And our innovation approach is to how do we add more from the biomass that we're involved in our case, kiwi fruit and avocados. How do we extract specific bioactives and molecules that will have some causal effect on hauora or holistic well-being for people, be that in communities or be that in international marketplaces. Our approach to investment is pretty simple. We invest with the investment metrics. We invest in a term sheet that also commits to build the capability of our young people, and we invest in a term sheet where we get to utilise the technology ourselves too. So that's a quick fly through around a very thin glimpse at what you'd call our Maori economy, particularly in prime industries, and just some of the activities that I'm proud to be involved in.
It's I guess what I heard you talk about was innovation, not a fear of taking a risk and something not working, because that's how you get to things that work, and also a real long-term view that incorporates multi-generational development so that it sets you up for future success as opposed to a seasonal. You know, I think sometimes in ag we tend to be a little bit season to season as opposed to taking a really good long perspective.
Yes, correct.
So, that's pretty cool. It's very impressive. Now, Andrew, do you want to give us a bit of background? And you recently wrote about the Māori voice and the agribusiness, KPMG agribusiness agenda. Do you want to give us a rundown on some of the themes from that?
Sure, JJ. Kia ora tātou. I whakapapa te tūhoi, but I actually grew up in Paengaroa, so I've done my fair share around kiwi fruit and so on around the Bay of Plenty when I was growing up. I grew up in a non-Maori family, in a non-Maori home, even though my father was Maori. Unfortunately, my parents separated when I was much younger, but 3 years ago, my fiance and I were living in Singapore, and we were coming back to New Zealand, and she pointed out a pretty astute observation where she said, actually, you're very different to your Maori cousins and your Maori whānau. And so I guess on the back of that and some home truths, it brought me home 3 years ago, firstly to learn about my tūpuna, but to connect to my whakapapa and to come home, so to speak, because I think if Jen and I are lucky enough to have children in the future, we'd like them to know their Chinese heritage and their Māori heritage. So that's kind of the basis of me, a quick fly background, but I spent 20 odd years in industry before coming to KPMG 3 years ago. I think it's important to share that when I went about this work, I was quietly packing myself because I don't feel like I have the authority to maybe talk much about Māori as I'm on my own journey. But I guess the tagline is I'm a good listener, and I've tried to succinctly summarize what I did with all the interviews across the agenda and the work that we did. But it touched on 5 major themes, and the theme was about empathy, or the start line being further back, which we've just discussed earlier on, being better together and building trust, adherence and reciprocity to not only cultural aspects, but also our environment, about enablement, definitely about our young ones, and then about addressing perceptions of the past. And I guess in big bucket themes, what we really see is probably point 1, 4, and 5 you could group together, being empathy, enablement, and addressing perceptions. If we go about setting those right, then we can go on to culture and our environment, and then as a result we come back to number 2, which is about being better together. And just to recap, I guess, around the empathy, the enablement, and the addressing perceptions, one of the statements that really stood out in the interviews was that for Māori to succeed, you have to be absolutely Maui in your approach. And that means that everything's all in to at least get a chance to try and succeed. And the observation from those that I interviewed was that not everyone, not every business has to do that in order to be able to get a chance to succeed at whatever their aspiration is. So I thought that was really, really a big call out, and it sort of gave me gravity or context, I guess. And then I guess what falls out of that is that the start line is further back for Māori. We talk about creating systems and processes and programs with lots of different agencies to try and it's difficult, right? Because you're trying to meet an average across maybe an industry or a sector. But unfortunately, a lot of Māori fall below that average, and actually it's a higher cost and a higher risk to try and actually get into some of these programs. And so you inadvertently perhaps have a situation or programs that leave a big demographic, and you know what I said in the agenda was you know the most important voice or demographic of people behind, and then you inadvertently keep them in an area where you know it's extremely difficult to be able to get any level of success. So by looking at systemic change and bringing the start line further back, in the words of you know the people that I interviewed, we at least get a chance to create something that's of use, and we don't continue to ask, you know, in this case, Māori to keep trying to keep trying to achieve unattainable levels. It's just not possible. So it's a very hard starting line. Second, around culture and I guess environment comes into this, because it was in the context of Te Taiao, but actually the use of mātauranga Māori in, you know, brands, provenance stories, you know, company values and what have you, aren't necessarily always done so in the correct way. And you know, it can be quite offensive. Māori in particular find it very, very offensive. So if we can learn to maybe understand a way in which to correctly go about that, that would be very, very good. But also, you know, to understand that it's not just done when it suits us. It's not like a program where, okay, this is a point in time. It's done in reciprocity. If you're serious about using Mātauranga Māori, or if you're serious about using a Te Taiao framework, it is about reciprocity, and you need to understand your liabilities is the wrong word, your obligation to what you're committing to. And, you know, it's interesting to see, I was at an event a little while ago where we talk about you know, New Zealand's uniqueness on an international stage with our exports is absolutely Mātauranga Māori, and this makes us unique. And yet we didn't open with the mihi whakatau. We just skipped straight to dignitaries and what have you, and that's no disrespect to anyone, but again, it sort of plays to the point. So, and then around, I guess, being better together, sorry, it's about if we can create equitable systems, there's actually an exchange program as we go along, and we build trust as a result, and then everyone prospers as a result, and New Zealand Inc. prospers. So those were kind of the findings and what I heard, and trying my best to actually articulate it, you know, in the words of those that I interviewed. And I was very fortunate that they gave me a tremendous amount of time and have to explain things to a Māori that is on his own journey. So yeah, I appreciated it.
Awesome. Te Horipo, have you got any thoughts based off what Andrew's just said?
Yeah, any relationship with Māori and the utilisation of our matauranga has to be done with integrity. It has to be enduring, and you need to be able to partner with those people that would have the relevant authority, be it mana whenua or whomever. You know, the way we do things definitely is a relationship building bridge, and some of the work we've done up in China proves that again and again. And the Chinese have this term called quanqi, and that's around a multi-level mana and reciprocal based relationship building, and it's something very familiar with us. So there are some culture to culture bridges that we can build, but ultimately we have to also build the reality of what we're doing. For, you know, what do we actually have to export, what do we have to transact, and how will we do that, for example. So one of the challenges for Miraka, for example, was is it a Māori owned business or is it a Māori business? So to be a Māori business, there are a number of multi-layered things in place to ensure that we actually are a Māori business in every which way, keeping in mind that only around 20% of our supply base is actually Māori. So it's quite inclusive of non-Māori too, and it's a very successful cultural business model, in addition to being a very successful commercial business model.
It's I've actually had the privilege of attending the Miraka Awards evening and the day, and it was probably one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had, where people talking about the difference it made to their lives just working there, and you know, I think there is something special about that brand, and I think it does incorporate, and it's very inclusive, it feels very inclusive when you're part of it. So I guess when we look at it all then and we think about all this, is there more that needs to be done? So if working together is really important, if more integration is more important, I guess from my perspective, I kind of hear you both speak and I'm like, it sounds like non-Māori will benefit significantly from engaging in Māori principles, but you know, we can't just veneer it. We can't just whack a Māori translation under our brand and say, oh, we're amazing. You know, what do we need to do to actually integrate this? If I was a company or I'm an organization, where do I start? Either way.
start with a trusted, a person that can be a trusted advisor. Like, for example, I know there's some MPI of Maori Agri team around here. They certainly are on the ground and they're trusted amongst Maori agribusiness. Even some of our banks, say like ASB with Anthony Ridanui and David Harrison. So there is to find a person in which to start the conversation. Like most asset bases and communities, there are actually a small number of influential people that are very influential across Māori primary industries. So often the person you're talking to is not the person that may actually be the chief. So undertaking your due diligence and also committing to the long term. You know, people come and go, organisations are restructured, and they want a Māori name and a whakatauaki and so forth. But it's got to be enduring. If it's not enduring, it's probably not even. I wouldn't even start the journey if you're not committed to it.
Right. Andrew,
Yeah,
any further?
I think just to add to that, just understanding, how Māori engage in terms of sharing our whakapapa. The whole idea of a pepeha is to share actually your origins and actually where you do intersect and connect. And then actually that's a fantastic foundation. MPI is great as well, but you would be surprised that actually by engaging with someone and being authentic around how you're doing that and actually letting them know where you're from, you'll be surprised at how many connections that you actually do have. And to Horipo's point, it may not be the top. You may come in somewhere, but you're engaging in the right way to find the right way of actually having a long-term, partnership or engagement at least. So, yeah.
Awesome. And actually I have a question here that's been sent through. I think kind of asks this again, Andrew, is I've seen businesses that are based in one location build really strong relationships with mana whenua where their business is based. However, it's more difficult when you've got businesses, I guess, across New Zealand, crossing into different paths. And how do you think, how should businesses look at exploring the iwi relationships that are most appropriate?
In my point of view, and again, I'm on my own journey. I think it comes back to the whakapapa thing in terms of connecting and for working out who you do know in a region, and working from there. But I also think maybe people need to understand that it takes time. It's not done instantaneously that, okay, we set up a meeting, we go down and we talk about what we want and then we go away and agree it, tick. That's not quite how it works. You've got to actually firstly build at a human level and then go from there. And then actually, if you are aligned in values and your vision for what is you're trying to do, then actually that's probably where the secret sauce is, as opposed to just going, well, I engaged one time for half an hour meeting, I flew all this way. It doesn't matter how long you flew, or it doesn't matter how long you drove. Actually, if you were to look at a typical weekend for most Māori, everyone's in the cars going around and seeing different whānau and doing different things. So I think you need to understand the pace at which things will happen as opposed to what you think is right in the business world.
Cool.
Yeah, so I support that, and there are a small number of some of our Māori leaders, both male and female, that operate at that national level and that national interconnectedness. So iwi through whakapapa and whanaungatanga are intricately linked. So having access to some of that intelligence would help navigate that pathway.
So who would they go to Horipo with that? Who do you ring? Is it Foma, or is it, where would you start?
Yeah, ring Foma, I guess. So again, there's people around this table that are deeply connected. So that may be within the banks. It may, Andrew, with the top 5 firms typically have people in this place and space too. And yeah, so yeah, and even from a relationship perspective, we'd be happy to provided advice to, I guess, and guidance depending on the intent.
Awesome. Now, a bit of a random question, I guess, is do we have an integrated, do we integrate Māori into strategy, or do we have a Māori strategy? And is there a difference in your eyes?
Well, for Māori collectors, typically there's no difference. It's integrated, full stop, and in both strategy and practice. For non-Māori, I think you'd actually try and do both too, and they'd be interlocked, and you'd weave those interconnections between those two approaches that you just described. But again, that needs some skill and navigation and experience.
I think my, just to draw a parallel and give people context, JJ, you know, after COVID, I think everyone started to talk about, you know, the importance of digital strategies, you know, whether it's within supply chains or actually if it's at the consumer end. And what we saw was it shift from being sort of ancillary, sorry, can't see my hand, ancillary to, you know, your core strategy now coming foundational. I think you could almost draw a parallel to, you know, the same thing for Māori, you know. If people are authentic about weaving Māori into, you know, their business, and your intentions and visions are aligned, you know, why would it not be one of the same, you know? And, you know, it shows more commitment, I guess, and that you're, you know, you're not just aiming for a market need or what have you, you're building resource, you're building capability, you're future-proofing your business to be successful. And part of that might be, you know, the Mātauranga Māori side, and while developing young Māori, but then also, you know, meeting the market side need or anything else. So it was just interesting to see after COVID that everyone started bringing in what was largely an ancillary sort of digital strategy into the foundation, and I can't see why that couldn't happen in a Māori context as well, provided that it's with the right intent.
Yeah, and I just keep hearing from both of you. I kind of keep smiling to myself because I'm thinking everything you're talking about, as you talked about, Horipo, is commitment and long-term thinking and integrity. And I guess in the non-Māori, what you find is everyone just wants it now. You know, I want to set a 6-month strategy, and by the end of that 6 months, we want to see these things. And to me, I'm hearing patience and time and commitment to it, where it's not going to happen in that 6 months time frame. So you're going to set a 20-year strategy, which for non-Māori, by the way, is like setting a 1,000-year strategy. You know, you're going to set a 20-year strategy in your business that actually starts to engage and incorporate in an authentic way, that when there's a change of staff, you don't just drop it and run. And so, I mean, I guess that leads me to the point around, again, I just feel like we're getting so much. You know, non-Māori organisations get so much from Māori. Do you think there's a suitable amount of investment coming back into Māori from non-Māori organisations who are benefiting from it?
Capital's never really been our problem. In fact, pre-COVID, the world was probably awash with capital. So it's really about the relationship and the source of that capital. And you've got the more recent advent, particularly New Zealand, around impact and purpose capital. So I think we were always in that place and space. So we're very particular around who we do business with and who would invest in what we do and the rationale why. But you know, we often overlook the banks. The banks have been the biggest bank rollers of Maori economic development bar any other finance source. And I'd take my hat off to the way that they've actually developed over the last decade.
Yeah, the commitment's pretty strong there and very genuine. Andrew, any thoughts on that, sort of the investment needed, or is there enough investment?
I think just your word just now, JJ, it's actually the investment is the commitment, and then the commitment to reciprocal programs, you know, that actually, you know, develop capability. So I think, you know, wherever capital comes from, it needs to come with capability, and not capability that we can just sort of develop, capability that you know, actually sets us apart and leverages, you know, the strong points that already exist between two parties. You know, we kind of call out some of them on this this call around Maori, but actually, you know, future capability, what is it? You know, so I'd hope it comes with capabilities to infuse and to grow together.
And I guess if we expand further on capital, and this is pretty a bit of a self-interest topic, really, you know, Te Horipo, you said that you feel that capital's a wash. You know, I guess when we look at Maori businesses, and we know that, you know, the land and is a no-go, but any other sort of assets and things that have purchased outside of that, what sort of opportunities for potentially IPOs or for intergenerational assets or anything like that? Is there more opportunities for, I guess, organisations to support Māori businesses in the capital space, whether it be through structure or profile or?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. My comment around the world's awash with capital relates to pre-COVID, I got to say. Things have changed a little bit now. You know, we're all pretty used to limited partnership structures. If you look at outfits like My Farm and Rocket Apples and so forth, you know, the mainstream investment community has a level of comfort with a leased land option, for example. So there's different ways to structure these things. For Awanui Hukapak, we're the largest shareholder within Seeka, which is a publicly listed company. So we work with Seeka at a number of different levels and also their international shareholders. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, structure follows strategy. And I take the point that Andrew made is around connecting a capability, and a capability build around accessing capital is pretty critical too.
Yep. Andrew, any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think in my limited time of being home, and I've been away 15 odd years and only home 3, my experience so far in dealing in particularly with the Maori agri-economy has been people seem pretty adverse to debt. So maybe just actually getting used to using debt and actually doing it in a controlled manner to achieve the growth in which, you know, is available to be captured. And maybe that is the capability that needs to come. You know, or actually maybe that's a program that's required from us to actually say that it's not big and scary. It can be used to fuel the growth in an appropriate way. But you know, Te Awanui Hukapak is a prime example of a mature scale that actually has the capability to assess these types of things. But all Maori don't necessarily have that, but actually they sit on some pretty good opportunities. And I think from my own, you know, being away 15 years in Africa, Asia, and the Americas, and what have you, I'd also be worried that if capital is coming in, that it comes in with the wrong intent, and if you don't build the capability to be able to negotiate effectively, then it's a lamb to the slaughter. You know, excuse the pun. So, but,
as long as it's roasted well with mint.
There's another comment around capital. Is one of the emerging sort of contemporary trends is you're getting PSGs and iwi organisations investing alongside of Māori collectives too. So you're getting some Māori collective investments and investment funds, and I think that will just continue to grow.
Awesome. So, I mean, one of the things that we that I've been looking at for a while now, for the last year anyway, is environment, social governance, or ESG. And you talked about it, Te Horipo, before in regards to, you know, impact investment. And so, I guess, and someone gave me this beautiful analogy the other day. Actually, it was Ian Proud from KPMG talking about, you know, for many years, I think it was environment was driving the ESG car, and now it's social. Social's driving the car. Do you think that Māori, or I guess, is an opportunity for New Zealand to actually have investment in this space that shows a uniqueness or a distinctness of New Zealand in the ESG or impact investment arena?
Yeah, so I think Māori will always have a multiple lens around tai awa's kaitiaki or social dividends through to our marae and to scholarships, etc. I think the thing that's really changed is we get to utilise our traditional knowledge in a contemporary setting, and the game changer for me is effectively technology innovation that allows us to do that. With climate change, not because of government regulation, but just simply climate change, and we need to do things differently on our land now. So that difference will be reaching into our old way of doing things around mimicking nature in particular, but also looking at the new technology innovation that's actually out there to enable us to be better and enduring kaitiaki over our domains, in particular our whenua and our water.
Awesome. Andrew, any thoughts on that?
The thing I would add, because I think it's been well covered, is from a consumer side, how significant and important it is to consumer groups now, and with millennials and centennials making up a massive demographic of spend, whether or not they own the money or earn the money, they spend the money. It's another question, but I think the power of their voice is actually driving businesses to pay more attention, those that go all the way back to community. And in my experience since being here, I took away a Maori organisation and sat in front of a very large retail group. And we got our ducks in a row, and we articulated not only the science behind the products that we had, not only the structure and who was in the room and why, but also that it led all the way back to community. And from myself coming from industry, I'd never been in a negotiation that got anywhere close to that. It was always like crawl through the little door and, you know, beg for a place in the line. And so that shocked me, because, you know, that's 20 years of my experience that I'd never experienced that before. So to see the power of it actually come out with senior negotiators was really interesting. And I think if we can demonstrate that through innovation and technology, it's, yeah, we're in a pretty good position, especially when you start to, you know, articulate, well, actually, the reason why this entity exists is for the beneficiary of, for the beneficiaries of XYZ numbers. And, you know, did you understand this about our culture? It goes from a negotiation to a collaboration. What can you do? What can we do? Co-invest, and boom, you know. Yep. And that's, yeah, again, from my days in industry, never experienced that at a personal level. So.
And I guess, as you say, it's that consumer level, there is that desire to seek it out. You know, COVID's accelerated a lot, and it was probably always bubbling there, but I think COVID's really turned. Someone said it the other day, you know, we've gone from trying to do volume to get value for what we produce, and now it's from value to values. So people are buying based off their values, and when we connect with values, that will be part of that purchasing hierarchy.
I think that purchasing on values is also demanding that distribution of the value throughout the value chain is going to be more equitable as well. You know, I'm saying that just from observation. I haven't seen it yet, but I was in a panel with a large retailer with a farming group, and you know, the farming group was talking about the increasing cost of compliance to, you know, meet these ever-changing needs. What premium do we get paid? And the retailer had said, well, you don't get paid any premium. That's your license to operate. And so then the question came to me, and I said, well, I kind of beg to differ, because I think society will put pressure on us to actually be more equitable in distributing the value across the value chain. So, but time will tell. Again, that's my own view, and we'll see if it actually plays out. So,
gonna be some interesting things play out in the next year or so.
Yeah.
Hey, and we've just had one more question come through, and it's just, I've seen many examples of New Zealand organisations having good intentions to integrate Maori cultural competencies into their organisation, but we've seen varying degrees of success. Do you have any examples of organisations who you think have implemented Māori culture competencies into their workplace really well, and what do you think their key ingredients for success were? Just an easy question for you.
I've been really focused on Māori organisations, to be honest with you, and around non-Māori organisations, I'm probably not widely versed in who. Perhaps if I think about NZ Marina and John Brackenbridge is probably a good starter now that John's just popped into my mind, and what they're doing and their whole design think approach and looking for co-design solutions that fit demand in specific markets locally and globally. You know, that whole approach has been quite an integrated approach. And knowing John well, we know that he is integrity when he's looking at our interaction with not only some of our Māori producers, but also at every other level.
Yep.
That would be one example that would come to mind.
Awesome. Yeah, and you certainly got, when you think of it too, when you think of John, you think of a long-term thinker, integrity, innovation, not a fear of failing, you know, prepared to give things a go, and definitely respectful of difference. Andrew, any thoughts on that?
I think I actually need to really think about it and come back to you, because, you know, like, well, yeah, I mean, it's tough to, I think not to take away credit from those that are actually working on it, because, you know, what is success? Is success that we have more young Māori within different organisations, or that we bring on values? You know, it's one thing, but to talk about it being a raging success or a success, at least it's hard for me to actually think of it. So I have to loop back on that one, sorry.
No, but I kind of love that, because that's quite telling in itself, right? So that tells us that we're early in this journey, that, you know, there does need to be a little bit more commitment. And I think if we were all honest as businesses, the commitment needs to be a little bit stronger than putting, you know, translating our brand in Māori underneath the brand. And it needs to be, I guess, more of an integrated approach, and you know, all credit to people giving it a go, because people aren't going to get it right to start with. But I guess don't do that thing where you give it a go without getting support. You know, you go to your, as you talked about before, Te Horipo, you know, you go to your MPI if you're in agri space, or, and I'm sure the other government agencies, you know, I'm sure MB support non-agri businesses in this space as well, and, you know, the banks, and Andrew yourself, you know, there's lots of places to go to. I guess what I often see is people try and almost Google an answer. And do it themselves. And again, we're not partnering, we're not having relationships, and we're not engaging in the right space.
Yeah, I think the first thing is actually, just like any other service, if you are going to seek professional help, because it is professional help on working out how to engage in Māori, pay for it. It's not a case of just, oh, I know a Māori and they can give me XYZ, or you might land with somebody like me who's on the start of their journey home. And, you know, but also we pay for lawyers, we pay for consultants, we pay for accountants, and all these other services. This is a service. If you're authentic about trying to instill these fundamental ways to your business and actually get longevity about collaboration, then you would pay for it, you know. And there's I read an article recently which said, you know, in the world of accounting, you know, there's many, but in Māori there is few. So, you know, yeah, the tagline being, you know, if you are going to actually get guidance and be true to it, then you need to pay, and because people's time is not free. You know, it's not just come and help me a little bit. So
yeah, that's an awesome point. Hey, look, we just had a question come in. What role or responsibility of government and industry in partnering, resourcing Māori for primary industry innovation and development? So where do you see their role?
Well, government have a treaty obligation, that's the first point, and not only in principle but in practice. Government have a responsibility to ensure that they have fit for purpose policies and programs that respond accordingly to the need on the ground, say for example for Māori agribusiness. Industry organisations, say like Hord NZ, Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb NZ receive levies from Māori producers. So there needs to be demonstrable outcomes as a result with Māori agribusiness. So so it still comes down to a partnership approach. And some of the MPI people around this virtual room would have heard me talk about the double hold waka, the waka haurua, and it's around that interrelationship that joins those two holes together, be it kawangatanga on one hole and tino rangatiratanga from a Māori perspective on the other hole. So it all comes down to those interrelationships for practical outcomes that are fit for purpose.
Yep. And I guess when we look at, when you think of the industry groups or the levy groups, again, it comes down to commitment, integrity, and that investment longer term, thinking beyond today or this season, thinking out many years and looking at the contribution, I guess, coming in from those levies come from Māori businesses as well.
Mm-hmm. I think Māori communities know what's best for Māori communities. Māori agribusiness knows what's best for Māori agribusiness. Philosophically, our elders used to tell us that within the current generation, there are also the solutions for that generation. So really just getting those ground up solutions and enabling them is probably the critical function of industry and government.
Awesome. Andrew, anything to add to that?
No, I just think that, it's not one silver bullet for all of Māori across New Zealand. There's very different challenges in my learnings, between regions. And so while, developing any sort of future, support programs or what have you, it's just being mindful of that. And then also, during the programs, it's instilling capability again. So it's just reinforcing the capability pieces. So.
Right. Well, look, I'm just going to ask you both one last question. It's an easy one, but what's your greatest wish for New Zealand?
I think to be Aotearoa New Zealand. That's the first point from my perspective. The second thing is I think our nation's conversation around water will signify the maturity or not of our nation and where we're at as a people.
Andrew?
For me, it's moving the start line back to allow everyone to play, and I guess in making fit for purpose systems where we don't inadvertently hold those that don't meet the current thresholds in a bracket, and I say inadvertently because it's a tough one to solve, and when you do that, actually the cost of trying to reach that threshold and the risks associated with that for those that don't fall within the bracket increase. So it's just a hiding to nothing, and then that I think creates more problems. So my hope would be that we could fundamentally shift backwards a little bit in terms of structures to bring us all along. So
create opportunities for everyone. Well, look,
better together.
Exactly. Look, thank you so much for your time. Horipo, thank you so much for jumping in. You are an incredible human, and I've loved getting to know you. And I've stalked you electronically significantly in the last 24 hours. So I know that neither of you love the limelight. So I get that this was not the most awesomest thing that you wanted to do today, but your time and your energy is very much appreciated. So have a great day.
Kia ora, Jojo. Thank you.
Mauri ora kia koutou. Kia tātou. Thank you.
Ka kite.